I remember the way she looked at me last night. I just don't remember why it made my heart stop. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed wasn't the unfamiliar ceiling or the soft gray light filtering through half-closed blinds. It was the silence, the kind that felt too heavy for a normal morning after a birthday party. My head throbbed like I'd slept for 3 hours instead of 8, and there was this strange, hollow gap in my memory, like someone had taken a clean slice out of the night before. I blinked, trying to ground myself, but then I turned my head slightly and everything inside me froze. This wasn't my room. The navy sheets, the stack of books on the nightstand, the faint scent of vanilla and laundry detergent, it all clicked into place at once. Lily's room. My best friend's room. My very straight, very off-limits best friend. I sat up too quickly, the world tilting for a second as I grabbed the edge of the mattress, my pulse suddenly racing. Okay, I whispered under my breath, trying to piece things together like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Last night was my birthday. There had been music, too many people packed into my apartment, cheap champagne, laughter that blurred into noise. I remembered Lily arriving late, standing in the doorway with that same calm, unreadable expression she always had, like she existed just slightly outside the chaos of everyone else. I remembered hugging her, maybe holding on a second longer than usual. And then, nothing. My stomach tightened. I looked down at myself, noticing I was wearing one of Lily's oversized t-shirts instead of the dress I'd picked out hours before, and that alone sent a wave of unease through me. That wasn't normal. We didn't just end up here. We didn't cross lines. We had rules, even if we'd never said them out loud. A soft creak from the doorway made my heart jump into my throat. I turned, and there she was. Lily Brooks. Standing there like she hadn't slept either, her hair slightly messy, her expression caught somewhere between guarded and something else I couldn't name. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at me, and for a second, the air between us felt charged, like there was a conversation already happening that I wasn't part of yet. "You're awake," she finally said, her voice quieter than usual, almost careful. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Yeah." I forced a small, awkward laugh. How did I get here? The question hung there, heavier than it should have been. Lily's eyes flickered, just for a moment, and then she looked away, like she was choosing her next words with too much precision. "You don't remember?" she asked. Something in the way she said it made my chest tighten. I shook my head slowly. "No, not after you showed up." Silence stretched again, thicker this time, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer I was waiting for wasn't simple. Lily took a step into the room, stopping just short of the bed, her hands tucked into the pockets of her hoodie, like she needed something to anchor herself. "Emma," she started, then paused, exhaling softly like this wasn't easy for her either. "Something did happen last night." My heartbeat stuttered. "What kind of something?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me again, really looked this time, and whatever I saw in her expression made my chest feel too small for my lungs. "Not the kind you're probably thinking," she said quietly. And somehow, that didn't make me feel better. It made everything worse. Because if it wasn't what I was thinking, then what was it? And why did it feel like whatever I'd forgotten mattered more than anything I could remember? The way Lily said it kept echoing in my head, like there was a second meaning I was not allowed to reach yet, and I hated how my chest tightened every time I tried to fill in the blanks myself. I pushed the covers back slowly, my movements careful, like anything too sudden might make whatever fragile truth existed between us shatter completely. "Then help me understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, even though my fingers were curling into the fabric of her shirt without me noticing. Lily shifted her weight, her gaze dropping for a second before she looked back at me, and that hesitation alone told me more than any answer could. She never hesitated. Not with me. Not ever. "You were not feeling well," she said finally, each word measured, like she was building something she did not want to collapse. "You drank more than usual. I brought you here so you could rest." I blinked, trying to match her version of events with the fragments in my head, but it felt too clean, too simple, like a story missing its most important detail. "That is it." I asked, tilting my head slightly, searching her face for anything that did not fit. Her jaw tightened, just barely, and that tiny shift sent a sharp pulse of awareness through me. That is not all, she admitted quietly. There it was again. That space between truth and something deeper. I exhaled slowly, my heart picking up pace again. Then what are you not saying? For a moment, she did not answer. The silence stretched until it felt like it might snap, and I could hear the faint hum of traffic outside, the distant sound of a car passing, grounding me in a world that suddenly felt completely unfamiliar. Lily stepped closer, stopping just at the edge of the bed, close enough that I could see the faint shadows under her eyes, like she had been awake longer than I had. "Emma," she said, softer this time, and the way she said my name made something twist inside me, something I could not explain. "You asked me something last night." My breath caught. What did I ask? She hesitated again, and I realized she was not avoiding the answer because she did not want to tell me. She was avoiding it because she did not know how I would react when I heard it. "You asked me if I had ever lied to you," she said. That was not what I expected. Not even close. My brows pulled together as I tried to understand why that question mattered, why it felt like it carried more weight than it should. "And?" I pressed. Lily let out a quiet breath, her shoulders lowering slightly, like she was giving up on holding something back. "I told you the truth," she said. My pulse quickened. "Which is?" She met my eyes again, and this time she did not look away. "That I have never been as honest with anyone as I have been with you." I stared at her, the words settling into place, but not quite making sense yet, like a sentence missing its ending. "That does not explain why I am here," I said, my voice softer now, less defensive, more uncertain. Lily nodded slightly, like she expected that. "No," she agreed. "It does not." Another pause. Another breath. Then, quieter than before, she added, "After that, you said something else." My heart felt like it skipped, like it knew before I did that whatever came next was the piece I had been missing. "What did I say?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Lily's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face so quickly I almost missed it, and when she spoke, her voice was steadier than her eyes. "You said, maybe the reason you could not remember how you felt was because you were afraid of what it meant." And suddenly, without any clear memory to back it up, that sentence felt familiar in a way that made my chest ache, like a truth I had known once and somehow lost overnight. The words settled into the space between us like something fragile, something that could either break apart or reshape everything, and I hated that I could feel the weight of them without understanding why. I looked down at my hands, still gripping the fabric of her shirt, and slowly let go, as if the contact itself was part of whatever I had forgotten. "That sounds like something I would say," I admitted quietly, though it felt strange to agree with a version of myself I could not even remember being. Lily did not move. She was still standing there, watching me like she was trying to read something that was not on the surface, and for the first time since I woke up, I realized she was just as tense as I was, just better at hiding it. "Why would I be afraid?" I asked, more to myself than to her, but she answered anyway. "Because you do not like not being in control," she said softly. That earned a small, almost automatic breath of a laugh from me, because that part at least was true. I liked knowing where I stood, who I was, what everything meant. And right now, I had none of that. Just a missing night and a best friend who suddenly felt like a stranger I needed permission to understand. I glanced up at her again, searching her face for something familiar, something that would anchor me. "Did I say anything else?" I asked. This time, she hesitated longer, and that hesitation felt louder than any answer. My chest tightened again. "Lily," I pressed, my voice gentler now, but more certain. "Please." She exhaled slowly, her gaze shifting to the window for a second before returning to me. "You asked me why I never told you," she said. My brow furrowed. "Told me what?" I asked immediately, the question slipping out before I could stop it. For a second, I thought she might deflect again, but something in my expression must have convinced her otherwise, because her shoulders lowered slightly, like she was letting something go. "That I do not see you the way everyone else does," she said. The room felt smaller somehow, like the walls had moved closer without me noticing. I stared at her, trying to understand what that meant, but my mind kept circling back to the same empty space where the memory should have been. "And what does that mean?" I asked, my voice quieter now, careful, like I was stepping onto unfamiliar ground. Lily held my gaze, and there was no hesitation this time, no deflection, just something steady and unguarded that made my heartbeat pick up again. "It means you are not just my best friend," she said. The words were simple, but they landed harder than anything else she had said so far, because they filled in a space I did not even know existed. I felt my breath catch, my thoughts scrambling to catch up, to make sense of something that felt both completely new and strangely inevitable. "Did I know that?" I asked, the question barely leaving my lips. Lily's expression softened, just a little, and that small change made something in my chest ache in a way I could not explain. "Last night you started to," she said. Silence followed again, but it felt different now, heavier, more charged, like we were standing on the edge of something that could not be undone once we stepped into it. I swallowed, my mind racing through possibilities I could not confirm, emotions I could not fully claim. "Then why can I not remember any of it?" I asked, more frustrated than before, more desperate. Lily did not answer right away. Instead, she took one more step closer, just enough that I could feel her presence without her touching me, and when she spoke, her voice was steady, but softer than anything I had ever heard from her. "Maybe because remembering would make you have to choose," she said. And something about that made my chest tighten, because even without the memory, I could already feel that whatever that choice was, it was going to change everything. The word choose echoed in my mind long after Lily said it, like it had weight I could feel but not fully understand, and I hated how it made everything inside me feel unsteady, like I was standing on ground that might shift if I moved the wrong way. I looked at her, really looked this time, trying to match the person in front of me with the version of her I had known for years, the one who was steady, predictable, safe, and suddenly all I could see were the differences, the small changes that felt too significant to ignore. "What kind of choice?" I asked slowly, my voice quieter now, not because I was unsure, but because I was starting to realize the answer might matter more than I was ready for. Lily did not answer right away. Instead, she studied me, like she was deciding how much to say, or maybe how much I could handle hearing without breaking something between us that could not be fixed. "The kind you cannot take back," she said finally, her tone calm but firm, and that only made my chest tighten more. I let out a slow breath, my thoughts spinning in circles, trying to connect pieces that refused to stay in place. "You keep talking like something already changed," I said, my frustration slipping through despite my effort to stay calm. "But I do not remember it, Lily. I do not remember feeling anything different." The moment the words left my mouth, I saw something flicker across her face, quick and almost imperceptible, but it was there. Hurt. Not loud, not obvious, but real enough that it made my stomach twist. "That does not mean it did not happen," she said quietly. The softness in her voice made it worse somehow, like she was not trying to argue with me, just stating something she had already accepted. I swallowed, looking away for a second because holding her gaze suddenly felt like too much. "Then tell me," I said, forcing the words out before I could second-guess them. "Tell me what I felt." Silence answered me again, but this time it was different, heavier, like the room itself was holding its breath. When I looked back at her, she had taken another step closer without me noticing, close enough now that the space between us felt intentional, like a line neither of us had crossed yet, but both of us were aware of. "I cannot tell you what you felt," she said, her voice steady, but there was something underneath it, something I could not name. "That is not something I get to decide for you." I frowned slightly, frustration mixing with something else, something sharper. "But you know," I said. It was not a question. Lily held my gaze, and for a moment, I thought she might deny it, might step back into the safe distance we had always kept between us, but she did not. "I know what you said," she replied. My heart started racing again, faster now, louder, like it was trying to fill in the silence she kept leaving behind. "Then say it," I pushed, my voice barely above a whisper but more urgent than before. "What did I say?" Lily's eyes did not leave mine, and whatever I saw there made it impossible to look away, like I was already in the middle of something I could not stop. "You said you were tired of pretending," she said softly. The words hit me harder than I expected because they did not feel foreign. They felt familiar in a way that made my chest ache. "Pretending what?" I asked, even though part of me already knew the answer was not going to be simple. Lily hesitated for the briefest second, then spoke again, quieter this time, but clearer. "That nothing between us ever felt different." The room went still around us, and for a moment, I forgot how to breathe, because even without the memory, something inside me reacted like it recognized the truth in what she was saying, like it had been there all along, waiting for me to finally see it. The words settled between us like something fragile that could shatter if either of us moved too quickly, and I could feel the weight of them pressing down on every thought I tried to form, making it harder to separate what I knew from what I was only starting to understand. I let out a slow breath, but it did not steady me the way I hoped it would, because the feeling in my chest was not confusion anymore. It was recognition, quiet but undeniable. "That does not make sense," I said, though my voice lacked conviction, like I was arguing with something I already believed on some level. Lily did not step back, did not soften what she had said, and that made it impossible to ignore. "It does," she replied gently, and there was no pressure in her tone, only certainty, like she had gone through this moment before and already accepted where it led. I shook my head slightly, trying to push through the haze building in my mind. "If I really said that, then why do I not remember it?" I asked, and this time there was something else in my voice, something closer to frustration with myself than with her. Lily glanced toward the window for a brief second, as if grounding herself, then looked back at me. "Because you were not ready to keep remembering," she said, and the way she said it made it sound less like an excuse and more like a truth I had chosen without realizing it. I frowned, the idea unsettling in a way I could not easily dismiss. "People do not just forget things like that," I said, but even as I spoke, small moments began to flicker at the edge of my memory, not clear enough to hold on to, but present enough to make me hesitate. Lily noticed, of course she did, and her expression softened just slightly. "Sometimes they do when holding on to it feels like it would change everything," she said quietly. I looked down at my hands, noticing how tense they had become, and slowly forced them to relax, even though the tension inside me only seemed to grow. "And you think that is what I did?" I asked. Lily took a breath, then nodded once. "I think you meant what you said," she answered. "And I think it scared you more than you expected." I closed my eyes for a second, letting that settle, because it fit too well with the unease I had been feeling since this conversation started, like something inside me had been trying to surface and I had been holding it down without even knowing it. "What happened after I said it?" I asked, opening my eyes again and meeting hers, because now I needed to know more, even if it made things harder. Lily hesitated, not because she did not want to answer, but because the answer mattered. "You told me you did not want things to stay the same," she said, her voice steady but softer now. "You said pretending was easier, but it was not honest anymore." My chest tightened again, and this time I did not try to fight it, because the truth in those words felt too real to ignore. "And what did you say?" I asked. Lily held my gaze, and for a moment, everything else faded into the background. "I told you I felt the same," she said. The simplicity of it made it hit even harder, because there was no confusion in her answer, no hesitation, just honesty that had been waiting for me to catch up to it. I swallowed, the air suddenly feeling heavier, because now it was not just about what I had forgotten, it was about what I had chosen to avoid, and the realization that whatever came next was not something I could pretend away anymore. The air between us felt different now, not heavier exactly, but clearer in a way that made it impossible to hide behind uncertainty, and I could feel that clarity settling into my thoughts whether I was ready for it or not. I looked at Lily and realized that nothing about her expression had changed since she said those words, like she had already lived through this moment and was only waiting for me to arrive at the same place. "So what happened after that?" I asked, my voice steady but quieter than before, because this was no longer about proving anything, it was about understanding what I had been avoiding. Lily exhaled slowly, and for the first time, I noticed a hint of tension in her shoulders, like this part of the story carried more weight than the rest. "You did not give me an answer," she said. The simplicity of it caught me off guard, and I frowned slightly. "What do you mean I did not give you an answer?" I asked. She met my gaze without hesitation. "I mean you stopped," she explained. "You said everything you had been holding in, and then when it became real, you pulled back." I felt something twist inside my chest, not sharp, but deep, like a truth settling into place whether I wanted it to or not. "That does not sound like me," I said, though even as I spoke, it felt less like denial and more like disappointment. Lily gave a small, almost understanding nod. "It does not sound like the version of you that feels safe," she said gently. "But it is still you." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to process that, trying to match it with the person I believed myself to be, and finding that the gap between those two versions was smaller than I wanted to admit. "So I just walked away?" I asked. Lily shook her head slightly. "Not exactly," she replied. "You said you needed time, that you did not want to lose what we already had by rushing into something you were not sure you could handle." Her words landed carefully, like she was choosing each one to reflect what had happened without adding anything that did not belong there. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding, because that sounded like something I would say, something that made sense from the perspective of someone trying to protect what mattered to them. "And then I forgot all of it," I said quietly. Lily hesitated, then nodded once. "Not all at once," she said. "It was more like you started acting like nothing had changed, and after a while, it became easier for you to believe that was true." I looked away for a moment, staring at the floor as the pieces began to come together, not as clear memories, but as impressions, feelings that had been pushed aside instead of faced. "And you just went along with it?" I asked, not accusing, just trying to understand her side of it. Lily's expression softened again, but there was something else there now, something stronger. "I gave you the space you asked for," she said. "But I did not pretend it never happened." I nodded slowly, because that made sense, because it explained the quiet distance I had been sensing without being able to name. "And now?" I asked, lifting my gaze back to hers. Lily did not look away. "Now you remember enough to know it was real," she said. "And the choice you avoided before is still here." The words settled into the space between us, not rushed, not forced, just present, and for the first time, I understood that this was not about the past anymore. It was about what I was going to do next, and whether I was finally ready to stop pretending that what I felt could be ignored. For a long moment, neither of us moved, and I could feel the quiet stretching between us, not empty, but full of everything that had been left unsaid for far too long, and now there was no space left to hide from it. I took a slow breath, letting it out carefully, as if moving too fast might push me back into the same place I had been before, the place where pretending felt easier than facing what was right in front of me. "So this is it," I said finally, my voice steady but low, because saying it out loud made it real in a way that thinking about it never did. Lily did not answer right away, but her eyes stayed on mine, patient, not pushing, not pulling, just waiting. That made it harder, not easier, because there was no pressure to react, no urgency forcing me into a decision, only the quiet understanding that whatever I chose would come entirely from me. I glanced down for a second, then back up, because avoiding her gaze now felt like repeating the same mistake all over again. "I remember enough," I admitted, the words slow but certain, and as I said them, something inside me settled, like I had finally stopped resisting something that had been there all along. Lily's expression softened, not with relief exactly, but with recognition, like she had been hoping for that without expecting it. "Then you know what this means," she said gently. I nodded once, because I did, even if I was still figuring out how to say it. "It means I cannot keep pretending nothing changed," I said, and this time there was no hesitation in my voice, no uncertainty hiding behind the words. The truth of it felt solid, undeniable. Lily took a small breath, and I could see that she was listening carefully, not just to what I said, but to how I said it. "And what about everything else?" she asked quietly. The question lingered, not demanding an immediate answer, but asking for honesty, and for the first time, I did not feel the need to avoid it. I thought about the way things had been before, the comfort of knowing exactly where we stood, the ease of never having to question what came next, and I realized that while it had been safe, it had also been incomplete in a way I had never fully acknowledged. Everything else is still there, I said slowly. But it is not enough anymore. The moment the words left my mouth, I felt the weight of them, but also a sense of clarity that had been missing before. Lily held my gaze, and for a second, neither of us spoke, because there was nothing left to hide behind, no misunderstandings to sort through, just the truth sitting plainly between us. I was scared, I added after a moment, not as an excuse, but as an explanation I owed both of us. Not of you, but of what it would change. Lily nodded slightly, her expression calm, understanding. I know, she said. That is why I did not push you. I let out a quiet breath, because that made sense, because it explained the patience she had shown even when it must have been difficult. But I cannot keep doing that, I continued, my voice steadier now, more certain with each word. I cannot go back to pretending this is just what it used to be. The space between us felt smaller now, not physically, but in a way that mattered more, like the distance I had created before was finally starting to close. Lily did not step forward, but she did not step back either, and that felt like an answer in itself. Then do not, she said softly. The simplicity of it made everything else fall away, because it was not about finding the perfect words or making the perfect choice, it was about being honest in a way I had not allowed myself to be before. I took a breath, steady and deliberate, and met her eyes without hesitation this time, knowing that whatever came next would not be something I could forget or avoid, but something I would finally have to face, fully and without pretending. The moment stretched just long enough for me to realize there was no version of this where I could step back again without undoing everything I had just admitted, and for the first time, that did not feel like something to fear, it felt like something I needed to accept. I held Lily's gaze, steady now, not because the uncertainty had disappeared, but because I understood that waiting for certainty was the reason I had avoided this before. I do not want to lose what we have, I said slowly, choosing each word with care, not out of hesitation, but out of respect for what had brought us here. Lily's expression shifted slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition of something she had likely expected to hear. Neither do I, she replied softly, and there was no doubt in her voice, no hesitation that would make me question what she meant. I nodded, letting that settle, because it mattered more than I could easily explain. But I think I already risked that the moment I tried to pretend nothing had changed, I continued, and saying it out loud made it impossible to ignore how true it felt. Lily did not interrupt, did not correct me, and that silence gave me the space to keep going, to follow the thought all the way through instead of stopping halfway like I had before. What we had before was real, I said. It still is. But it was not the whole truth. The words came easier now, not because they were simple, but because I was no longer trying to filter them into something safer. Lily took a small breath, and I could see the way she was listening, fully present, not rushing me toward an answer, but not stepping away from it either. And now, she asked, her voice quiet but steady. I let that question sit for a moment, not because I did not have an answer, but because I wanted to be sure I was not holding anything back this time. Now I think the only way we do not lose it is if we stop pretending it is the same as it used to be, I said. Because it is not, and acting like it is only creates distance we do not need. Lily's eyes stayed on mine, and I could see something shift there, something softer but also stronger, like she was allowing herself to believe what I was saying. That means things will change, she said, not as a warning, but as a fact. I nodded. I know, I replied. And that used to scare me. It still does, if I am being honest. But not enough to make me walk away from it again. The honesty in that statement settled between us, not heavy, but real, and for the first time, it felt like we were standing in the same place instead of trying to meet somewhere in between. Lily took a small step closer, not enough to close the space completely, but enough to show she was not holding back either. You are sure? She asked, and there was no pressure in the question, only the need for clarity. I met her gaze without hesitation. I am sure that I do not want to ignore what I feel anymore, I said. And I am sure that whatever this becomes, it deserves more than pretending it is nothing. For a second, neither of us spoke, because there was nothing left to explain, Nothing left to hide behind, only the quiet understanding of what we were both choosing to acknowledge. Lily's expression softened in a way I had not seen before, not because something new had appeared, but because something real no longer needed to be hidden. "Then we take it one step at a time," she said gently. I nodded, because that felt right, because it was not about rushing into something unknown, but about allowing it to exist without denying it. And as we stood there, the space between us no longer felt like a barrier, but like something we were both ready to cross, not all at once, but honestly, without pretending, and without turning away from what had already been there all along. The quiet that followed her words did not feel uncertain anymore. It felt intentional, like we were both allowing the moment to settle instead of rushing past it, and for the first time, I did not feel the urge to fill that silence with something safer. I let out a slow breath, noticing how different it felt now, like something inside me had finally aligned with what I was saying instead of resisting it. Lily remained where she was, close enough that the distance between us felt like a choice rather than a barrier, and I realized that was what had changed more than anything else, not the situation itself, but how I was choosing to face it. One step at a time, I repeated quietly, more to myself than to her, but she heard it anyway, and the small nod she gave in response made it feel real, like we had both agreed to something without needing to define it further. I glanced toward the window for a moment, noticing how the light had shifted, softer now, like time had moved forward without me realizing it, and I wondered how long we had been standing here, going over something that should have been simple but never really was. "Does it feel different to you?" I asked, turning back to her, because I needed to know if what I was feeling was something we shared or something I had only just caught up to. Lily considered the question, not answering immediately, and I could tell she was taking it seriously, not brushing it aside with an easy response. "It feels more honest," she said finally, her voice calm but certain. "Not easier, but clearer." I nodded, because that matched exactly what I had been struggling to put into words. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Clearer." The word lingered between us, simple but meaningful, like it carried more weight than it should. I shifted my weight slightly, not out of discomfort, but because staying completely still felt unnatural now that everything inside me had started moving forward. "I think I was waiting for it to feel easy," I admitted, glancing at her briefly before continuing. "Like if it was right, it would not feel complicated." Lily's expression softened just a little more, and there was something almost reassuring in the way she looked at me. "Some things matter because they are not easy," she said. "They ask more from you." I let that settle, because it made sense in a way that cut through the last bit of hesitation I had been holding onto. And I was not ready to give that before I said. It was not a question, just a realization spoken out loud. Lily shook her head gently. "You were protecting what you understood," she replied. "Now you understand more." I exhaled slowly, feeling the truth of that in a way that did not feel like judgment, just growth, something that had taken time I did not even realize I needed. "Then I do not want to go backward," I said, more firmly this time. "Even if forward is uncertain." Lily's eyes met mine, steady and unwavering, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fall away again, leaving only this shared understanding we had finally reached. "Then we keep moving forward," she said. The simplicity of it grounded me, because it was not about having every answer or knowing exactly where this would lead. It was about choosing not to step away from it again. I nodded, feeling something settle into place inside me, something steady and real, and as the silence returned, it no longer felt like something to escape from, but something we could stand in together, without pretending, without hesitation, and without the need to look away from what had always been there, waiting for us to finally face it. The quiet understanding between us did not fade, but it shifted into something steadier, something that felt less like a moment and more like the beginning of a direction, and I could feel that difference in the way I stood, the way I breathed. Like I was no longer bracing myself for something to go wrong. I looked at Lily, really looked at her again, and this time there was no hesitation in what I felt, no second guessing whether it was real or something I had imagined, because it had been there all along, waiting for me to stop ignoring it. "So, what does the next step look like?" I asked, not because I needed a plan, but because I wanted to understand how we moved forward without losing the honesty we had just found. Lily tilted her head slightly, considering the question, and I could tell she was thinking about it the same way I was, not trying to define everything at once, but trying to keep it real. I do not think it has to look like anything specific, she said. I think it just has to be something we both choose, not something we fall back into. I nodded slowly, because that made sense in a way that felt grounded, not rushed or forced. So no pretending, I said, a small, almost half smile forming without me meaning to. Lily returned it, just slightly, but enough to make the moment feel lighter without losing its meaning. No pretending, she agreed. I took a breath, letting that settle, because it felt like a simple rule, but one that would change everything if we actually followed it. Then I guess the first step is being honest about what we want, I said. The words felt direct, but not overwhelming, like they were exactly what needed to be said. Lily's expression softened again, and I could see the trust in it, not blind or careless, but built on everything we had already been through. Okay, she said quietly. What do you want? The question landed differently this time, not like pressure, but like an opportunity, and I realized that answering it honestly was the most important part of everything we had just started. I did not rush my response, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to say it without holding anything back. I want to stop acting like this is just friendship when it has not felt that way for a while, I said. My voice stayed steady, even though I could feel the weight of the truth in it. I want to see where this goes, without pretending it is nothing. Lily held my gaze, and for a moment, I could see the impact of those words, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet shift of her expression, like something she had been waiting for had finally been said out loud. That is what I want too, she replied, and there was no hesitation in her voice, no uncertainty left to question. The clarity of it settled between us, not overwhelming, but solid, like something we could actually build on instead of something that might disappear if we looked away. I let out a slow breath, feeling a sense of calm that had not been there before, not because everything was resolved, but because we were no longer avoiding what mattered. Then we start there, I said. Lily nodded, and the simplicity of that agreement made everything feel more real than anything we had said before. There was no need to define it further, no need to rush into explanations or expectations, just the understanding that we were both choosing to move forward honestly. And as we stood there, the space between us no longer felt uncertain or fragile, but open, like something we were stepping into together, not because it was easy, but because it was real, and for the first time, that was enough. The decision did not feel like a sudden shift anymore. It felt like something that had already been set in motion long before either of us found the words to acknowledge it, and now that it was out in the open, there was a quiet sense of steadiness that replaced the uncertainty I had been holding onto for so long. I looked at Lily and noticed how natural it felt to stand here without the need to overthink every detail, like the space between us had finally aligned with what we both understood, but had never said. This still feels new, I admitted, my voice calm but thoughtful, because even with the clarity, there was still something unfamiliar about not holding back. Lily gave a small nod, her expression open and honest in a way that matched everything we had just shared. It is new, she said. Not because it started today, but because we are finally treating it like it matters. I let that settle, because it explained the feeling perfectly, not a beginning, but a shift in how we chose to see something that had been growing quietly all along. I glanced around for a moment, noticing the familiar details of the room, the same space where we had spent so much time acting like everything was simple, and it struck me how different it felt now without anything actually changing around us. It is strange, I said, a faint smile forming. Nothing looks different, but everything feels different. Lily followed my glance briefly, then looked back at me. That is because the change was never out there, she replied gently. It was always here. She placed her hand lightly against her chest, not as a dramatic gesture, but as a simple truth, and I understood exactly what she meant. I nodded slowly, feeling that same awareness settle inside me. I think I was waiting for something external to tell me it was time, I said. Like there would be a moment that made it obvious. Lily's expression softened with a hint of understanding. Sometimes the moment is just when you stop ignoring what is already obvious, she said. I let out a quiet breath because that felt true in a way that made everything else seem simpler, not easier, but clearer. Then I guess this is that moment, I said. There was no hesitation in my voice now, only a quiet certainty that had taken time to build. Lily held my gaze, and there was something steady in the way she looked at me, something that made it clear she was not questioning this anymore either. It is, she agreed. The words were simple, but they carried a sense of finality, not in an ending, but in the closing of the distance we had kept between us for so long. I shifted slightly closer without thinking about it, not enough to change everything at once, but enough to show that I was not holding back anymore, and Lily did not move away. The small change felt significant, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. I do not want to overcomplicate this, I said after a moment. I just want to be honest about what is already there. Lily nodded, her expression calm and certain. Then that is all we need to do, she said. There was no pressure in her voice, no expectation beyond what we had already agreed on, just a shared understanding that honesty was enough to move forward. I took a slow breath, letting the moment settle again, and this time, there was no urge to question it, no instinct to step back. Everything felt aligned in a way that made sense, not because it was perfectly defined, but because it was real and acknowledged. And as we stood there, no longer pretending, no longer avoiding what we both knew, it became clear that this was not about changing everything at once, but about allowing something true to exist without fear, and trusting that whatever came next would grow from that honesty rather than from doubt. The sense of clarity between us did not fade as the moment settled. It deepened, becoming something quieter but more stable, like a foundation that had finally been acknowledged instead of ignored, and I could feel that difference in the way I stood beside Lily now. Not guarded, not hesitant, just present. I let my gaze linger on her for a second longer than I normally would have before, and this time I did not look away out of habit, because there was nothing left to hide behind, no reason to pretend I did not feel what I felt. It feels different in a good way, I said, my voice calm, almost reflective, because I wanted to recognize that change instead of rushing past it. Lily gave a small, genuine smile, the kind that did not need to be explained, and it made something inside me settle even more. It does, she agreed softly. It feels real. I nodded, because that word carried everything we had been circling around until now, everything we had finally allowed ourselves to accept without hesitation. I shifted slightly, closing a small part of the distance between us again, not as a dramatic move, but as something natural, something that did not require overthinking anymore. I think I understand now why I pulled back before, I said, not looking away, because this part mattered just as much as everything else. Lily listened without interrupting, her attention steady and patient. It was not just fear, I continued. It was the idea that once I admitted it, everything would have to change all at once, and I was not ready for that. She nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. That makes sense, she said. Sometimes we think acknowledging something means we have to figure out the entire future immediately. I let out a quiet breath, because that was exactly it, the pressure I had put on myself without realizing it. But it does not have to be like that, I said, more to confirm it to myself than anything else. Lily's eyes met mine, steady and reassuring. It does not, she replied. It just has to be honest in the present. The simplicity of that idea grounded me in a way that nothing else had before, because it took away the need to solve everything at once and replaced it with something I could actually hold on to. I nodded, feeling that understanding settle into something solid. Then I think I can do that, I said. I can be honest now, without trying to predict everything that comes next. Lily's expression softened again, and there was something quietly reassuring in the way she stood there, not expecting more than what I was ready to give, but also not accepting less than the truth. That is all I ever wanted, she said gently. The words stayed with me, not heavy, but meaningful, because they reflected something simple that I had complicated for too long. I took a breath, steady and clear, and for the first time, it felt like I was fully present in this moment without trying to escape it. Then we keep going like this, I said, my voice certain, not because everything was figured out, but because this felt right in a way that did not need to be explained further. Lily nodded, and the quiet agreement between us felt stronger than anything we could have said. There was no rush, no pressure to define everything immediately, just the understanding that we were no longer holding back from something that had always been there. And as we stood there, closer now in a way that went beyond physical distance, it became clear that what mattered was not how quickly things changed, but that they were no longer being ignored, and that alone made everything feel more grounded, more real, and more possible than it ever had before. The stillness between us no longer felt like something fragile that could break. It felt steady, like a quiet understanding that had finally found its place without needing to be questioned, and I realized that this was what I had been avoiding before. Not the feeling itself, but the responsibility of accepting it fully. I looked at Lily again, and this time there was no hesitation in the way I held her gaze, no instinct to step back or soften what was already clear. "I think this is the first time I am not trying to hold anything back," I said, my voice calm but certain, because the truth of it settled naturally instead of feeling forced. Lily's expression reflected that same sense of calm, and there was something quietly reassuring in the way she stood there, like she had been ready for this moment without expecting it to come easily. "I can tell," she said softly. "It feels different." I nodded, because it did, in a way that was difficult to describe but impossible to ignore, like everything that had been uncertain before had finally aligned into something simple and real. I took a slow breath, not to steady myself this time, but to take in the moment fully, because I did not want to rush past it or treat it like something temporary. I used to think that if I let myself feel this, it would complicate everything, I admitted, glancing at her briefly before continuing. But now it feels like the opposite. Like ignoring it was what made everything harder. Lily gave a small nod, her eyes steady on mine. "That is usually how it works," she said gently. "The truth does not create the confusion. Avoiding it does." I let out a quiet breath, because hearing that out loud made something settle even deeper, like the last piece of doubt had finally found its place. "Then I do not want to avoid it anymore," I said, more firmly now. "Not now, not later." The words felt simple, but they carried a weight that I was finally ready to hold. Lily's expression softened again, and there was something in her eyes that reflected not just understanding, but trust, like she believed I would not step back this time. "You do not have to," she replied. "We already crossed that line the moment we stopped pretending." I nodded slowly, because that felt true in a way that did not need to be explained further, like something that had already happened regardless of whether I had acknowledged it before. I shifted slightly closer again, not out of uncertainty, but because it felt natural, like there was no reason to keep any distance that no longer made sense. Lily did not move away, and that quiet acceptance made everything feel even more real. "I do not know exactly where this will lead," I said after a moment, my voice steady and honest. "But I know I do not want to go back to what it was before." Lily held my gaze, and there was no hesitation in her response. "Neither do I," she said. The clarity of that answer settled between us, not overwhelming, but grounding, like something we could trust without needing to question it. I let out a slow breath, feeling a sense of calm that had not been there before, not because everything was perfectly defined, but because it did not need to be. "Then we just keep going," I said. "One step at a time, like we said." Lily nodded, and the simplicity of that agreement made everything feel complete in a way that did not require anything more. There was no need to rush forward or hold back, just the understanding that we were no longer avoiding what mattered. And as we stood there, no longer separated by uncertainty or hesitation, it became clear that this was not just a moment. It was a choice we were both making, to be honest, to be present, and to allow something real to exist without fear. And for the first time, that felt not only possible, but right.